Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Z. I'm a clinical psychologist specializing in transgender care. Welcome to my channel. Today I want to share with you why so many of you suddenly either realized during the COVID period, during what I call incubation period, that you are transgender or that you have gender dysphoria, that you're struggling with gender dysphoria, or two, why so many of you who already had gender dysphoria, but the gender dysphoria wasn't so severe and you felt like you were coping with it, suddenly found yourself again in this COVID incubation period where it was so severe and where you felt that you were compelled to do something about it. So I want to explain to you how COVID played a part in it. I want to explain to you why that has happened, and I think it's going to give you a really good understanding of why during this incubation period this has happened, and a good understanding why prior to that incubation period, why you were able to cope with it. So for starters, let's be very clear. COVID obviously did not cause nor is capable of causing people to have gender dysphoria or for people to identify as transgender. But what COVID did when it did happen, and by the way, still happening, we're still in pandemic, is it created an incubation container. It created a framework, frame comes to mind, but I'm also thinking about it's now escaping me, but it created a space, if you will, within which you were forced to turn your lens inwards and introspect into your inner world versus constantly having your lens outwards and extrospecting into the external world. So let me explain. COVID forced us to really limit, to really restrict our interactions with the external world, and especially our interactions with other human beings, right? COVID really created restrictions where we had to work from home, where we had to stay home. If we have kids were staying home, they were schooled at home. So in other words, our interaction with the world that we knew became incredibly constricted and limited to our space at home. So as a result, we didn't go out as much. We had to stay indoors, and a lot of places were closed. Because of this incubator that COVID created, like I said, your lens has started to turn inwards. Let me explain about the lens. If you think about it, by far and by large, in Western culture in the United States, our lens is very much outward, external world focus. What do I mean by that? From the moment you wake up and you brush your teeth, you start thinking about your external day, external world. You start thinking about, I gotta get ready. I gotta make sure I pack my lunch. I gotta make sure that I leave house at X time in order to get to the work, in order to avoid traffic. I gotta pick up somebody if I'm carpooling. If you have kids, you're thinking about, I got to take them to school. I gotta pack their lunch. In the middle of the day, you may have appointments you need to go through. At work, you're interacting with a lot of people. You may have presentations, you may have projects. After work, you maybe need to stop and do grocery shopping. Maybe you need to stop by gym and exercise, whatever it is that you need to do. But in other words, notice how all of your activities and interaction and things you think about and how you logistically organize your day is really externally focused. So it bears a very external lens, right? Well, when COVID hit and now all of those interactions were cut off, suddenly you found yourself having more time to yourself. When we find more time to ourselves, what happens to us as human beings is that we start turning that lens inward into who we are and introspect into who we are as people, introspect into our identity, introspect into where we've been, where we're at. This is why during COVID, not only gender dysphoria increased in the sense of there were more people who were coming out with gender dysphoria distress, but also a lot of other things just kind of really started coming out. Domestic violence increased, unfortunately. A lot of other things started to really come up. This is because the lens is turned inwards and we start looking at ourselves. Now, in the United States, again, the world is by far teaches us to navigate it through external lens. In fact, the world will actually reward us for living externally because the world tells us, work, move, make more money, put in more hours, work longer. It tells us that you have to be hamster on a wheel, ongoingly go, 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 go. It does not tell us to take your time, relax, practice self-care, meditate, sit with yourself. I think there's some people who are engaged in that. There's some people who are really good at meditating and through maybe their personal spirituality, not to confuse with religion, but personal spirituality, they're able to sit with themselves and be with themselves. But by far, for a lot of us, we are told to be the opposite. We're told to be very external driven, right? And again, the world supports it. This is not like European countries where shops are closed on weekend, and that in a way communicates to us, even non-verbal, is that, hey, this is a time to take off. This is not the time to go shopping. In America, there's a lot of shops that are open 24/7. In fact, my God, you can order online 24/7. Talk about the crazy externalized way of being. So in other words, we don't really value inward type of lens, which is, by the way, the most valuable lens of them all, because that's how we learn and figure out who we are. So COVID created a container that again enabled so many of us to turn that lens inward. When we turned the lens inward, suddenly, because we were now diving deep into who we are and into ourselves, that opened doors to a lot of repressed content, repressed materials, that opened up doors to a lot of things. If you were already dealing with gender dysphoria before COVID, the reason why you thought you were able to cope with it, or you thought your gender dysphoria was not so severe, is not because it wasn't so severe, but primarily because you were so external, that you were so busy occupying your brain, occupying, the software inside of your headspace, that there was almost non-existent room for you to think about your gender dysphoria. As a result, you felt that it wasn't so severe. Why? Because you didn't feel it as much. Now, during the COVID time, you can't keep yourself so busy. Suddenly this mechanism, this coping that you, if you will, this way of distracting yourself from dealing with gender dysphoria has been taken away from you. When it's taken away from you, your gender dysphoria that was already there really drastically increased. This is why for a lot of people who already had gender dysphoria, it got to the point where, and you know this, you know who I'm talking about, you suddenly had to do something about it. You suddenly had to deal with it. It suddenly became completely unbearable. And for a lot of adults who never had or felt like you never had gender dysphoria, right, prior to COVID, reason being is because a lot of you gender dysphoric feelings or gender dysphoric content has been repressed since early childhood. And now, because and plus external world, the way you externalize yourself through the world, enables you to further keep that lid on top of repressed material. Now the COVID hit, and again, for you, just like for the other group, the lens was turned inwards. And because the lens was turned inwards, suddenly that opened the door, that opened that content, and that content came up. That's why for a lot of you, like I said in my other videos, it feels like gender crisis. You're adults, especially age 30 and up. You woke up one day, I'm assuming a lot of you did during COVID, and a lot of you said, holy shit, what is happening? Suddenly I'm having gender issues. Why now? Is this some kind of crisis? Is it some kind of stressors? The answer is no. The answer is that simply you were in a space that enabled introspection. When introspection is enabled, we learn things about ourselves. Guess what? We learn things about ourselves we don't want to hear. We also learn things about ourselves that we try to repress. We also learn things about ourselves we don't want to face. This is why introspection in general is so valuable and so important, because we all have things we need to deal with. We all have things we need to work through. Some of the things are workable. Some of the things are, it's a matter of accepting that we have those things, but we're not perfect. We all have things that need to be brought to the surface, need to be addressed, need to be maybe cleaned up and dusted off and integrated into who we are as human beings. So the more we avoid introspecting and who we are, the less we become an insightful human being. The more we come across as shallow, as not having any depths, as empty, as unauthentic, as uninteresting. You met those people, I met those people where, you meet them and it's all surface level, right? It feels very surfacey. And the reason why it feels so surfacey is because The way their personality is built and their identity is circle and orbits around external world. And as we know, external world a lot of times is very surface level, right? We need more as human beings than just external world. We need the internal sense of self, internal orientation to ourselves to feel more authentic. So this is what happens, and this is how COVID was very, very instrumental in bringing that to the surface and bringing a lot of repressed material for a lot of people. And I know that it freaked a lot of people up. I know that really scares a lot of people. I always say gender dysphoria is a distress signal. No matter how painful it is, nonetheless, it is still a distress signal. It's a signal that is, it's like a knock on a door. It's a knock on a door that is trying to tell you, hey, something is going on. Something is going on within you that is not congruent, or something is going on that causes you pain and distress, and it needs to be addressed. I always encourage people to go towards the distress signal versus away from it, because it's the only way in order to deal with it, or to figure out a solution, or to be happier, or to alleviate distress and tension, is to actually confront it and go forward it versus running away from it. The longer you run away from it, you're really not making it go away. All you're doing is you're really just putting it over to the side over here, but it's still there. And at some point in life, you're still going to have to address it. Chances are the more you put it over here, the higher, more stronger it tends to come up. So hopefully this explains to those of you who had gender dysphoria why suddenly during the COVID your gender dysphoria just hit the roof, became even more intense. It's because your levels of distractions, your level of occupying, I always say gender dysphoria is like that white buzzing noise in the back of your head that never goes away. It's like a fan, just working. And when we're distracted with external world, we're able to quiet it enough where it doesn't really bother us as much. But when that taken away, the distraction is taken away, guess what? All you hear is a distressing noise, and that's what happened to a lot of you. For a lot of you who felt you didn't really have gender dysphoria and then suddenly had gender crisis, this is also why. Lens turned inwards, suddenly your repressed materials came up, and now you have to deal with it. So wanted to explain that because this is really important to get an understanding, and just in general to give you an example that it's really good for us as human beings to purposefully strive to create incubation periods for ourselves. Of course, not COVID driven, God forbid, but think about creating little incubating moments for you, maybe once a week, maybe 15 minutes in the end of a day when you're able to self-reflect. This is why self-reflective journals are so powerful, because they enable, in the busy days that we have, to turn our lens inwards, especially for those of you right now who are confused about your gender, who are not sure where on a gender scale you identify, who are not sure if you should transition at all, if it is for you, or those of you who are going through gender transition and just not sure how to deal with some of the obstacles, some of the challenges. Introspection is going to be really, really important. Don't shy away from introspection. It's going to teach you things about yourself, and it's going to help you understand yourself better, understand your strengths better. If you have any elements of weaknesses, it's going to bring them up, and guess what? Then you'll have an opportunity to turn them into strengths. So don't shy away from it. I always encourage people to have an introspection period in their daily life. Start to create purposeful incubation periods, because they're really, really instrumental and helpful. And unfortunately, the world pandemic of the world created it on us. Just, it's the way it happened. But I also think it's fortunate, because I do think it's a good thing that so many people finally woke up to their distress, because I believe eventually you would have woken up to the distress. And in my opinion, it's better to wake up sooner than later. It's better to deal with it sooner than later, so that we can move on and live happy, productive lives and enjoy your life. So comment below, let me know. I know that COVID incubation was very instrumental to you. Share in what way it was instrumental. Share what scared you or distressed you the most about the incubation period, how it affected you the most, and are you creating time and space in your life right now to turn the lens inwards in order to understand yourself better? Comment below. Love reading all of your comments, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.